Picking up where we left off, the rescue was a blur of violence and adrenaline. Boaz arrived at the cabin to find his mate under attack, and for the first time, the most feared pack in the region showed the world exactly why. Now, Hadassah lies in the pack infirmary, a small, broken form on white sheets, covered in dozens of stitches and fading bruises. She's been asleep for 2 weeks, her body retreating into a deep slumber to hide from the trauma of her past. But while her body rests, her soul is far from quiet. In a realm of gray mist and ancient whispers, Hadassah and Boaz find themselves standing before Luna, the mother of the werewolves. The goddess reveals a staggering truth. They are not just shifters. They carry the essences of Prince Ishmael and Princess Keturah, the lost rulers of the ancient Zion kingdom. The jagged black crowns etched into their wrists are not tattoos, they are the marks of a royal destiny. As Hadassah wakes to the sterile smell of the hospital, she is no longer the girl who hides in the shadows. She is a queen in waiting, tethered to an alpha who has refused to leave her side for 15 days. But with the crown comes a new danger. The witch Athaliah is hungry for the bloodline that escaped her centuries ago. The bond is sealed, and the king has found his throne. To see how it all began, check out the link in the description to part 1 of our story. Now, let's dive into part 2. Alpha Boaz, you are awake, Brittany cried out. Hadassah recognized her immediately. Brittany was the doctor who had treated her when Boaz first brought her to the pack house. The doctor moved toward the monitors, her eyes wide with relief. Both Hadassah and Boaz were hooked up to for drips. The clear tubes looked strange against their skin. Boaz didn't care about the medical equipment. He pointed a firm finger at the needle in his arm. Brittany, just remove this. Call my mother to my office right away, Boaz ordered. The doctor didn't argue. She moved quickly and worked with practiced hands. She slid the needles out and pressed cotton balls over the tiny punctures. As soon as Hadassah was free, Boaz stood up. He reached across the space and took her hand. The moment their skin touched, Hadassah felt a jolt. It was like a tiny explosion of heat traveled from her palm to her chest. She guessed it was part of the mate bond Boaz had described. It felt like electricity was humming under her skin. He led her out of the room and down the hall toward his office. Once inside, they sat together in the quiet room. The heavy oak desk and leather chairs felt grounded and solid compared to the goddess's palace. We are going to tell her everything, Boaz said. She might know something about these old stories. Hadassah bit her lip. She looked at the floor and shifted in her seat. The idea of talking to the alpha's mother made her stomach knot. She wasn't used to sharing her thoughts with anyone. Boaz reached out and stroked the back of her hand. It was a gentle movement that slowed her racing heart. It is okay if you do not want to talk in front of her, he whispered. No one is going to judge you here, I promise. The office door slammed open before she could thank him. Boaz's mother marched into the room. Her face was pale with worry. She didn't wait for an invitation. She threw her arms around both of them and pulled them into a crushing hug. You worried me so much, she sighed. I thought something terrible happened to you too. She pulled back and took a seat in a nearby armchair. She smoothed her hair and tried to regain her composure. Tell me, she said, what happened out there? We met Luna, Boaz said. His mother's brow furrowed. She leaned forward and gripped the arms of her chair. That is a very big claim, Boaz, she said. It is the truth, he insisted. We both saw her. Boaz began to recount the entire experience. He started with the moment their hands began to burn. He described the way the tattoos had appeared on their wrists like ink rising from under the skin. He told her about the moment they fainted and woke up in a forest that didn't belong to the physical world. Hadassah watched the alpha's mother. The older woman's eyes grew wider with every detail. Boaz explained how Luna took them to her castle. He told his mother about the explanation of souls and the history of the royal family. He even mentioned the castle Luna said was being prepared for them. She told us the story of King Melchizedek, Boaz continued. She told us about the son and the wife who came to her for help. The room grew very still. Boaz's mother looked from her son to Hadassah. She looked at their matching marks. The weight of the story seemed to settle over the room like a heavy blanket. If the moon goddess is preparing a place for you, his mother whispered, then the war from those stories isn't over. Boaz squeezed Hadassah's hand tighter. Then we need to know exactly what we are up against, Boaz said. We met the moon goddess, and she told us everything about the ancient souls choosing us, Boaz said, his voice tight with the weight of the news. His mother, Mia, let out a long sigh. She leaned back in her chair and began massaging her temples. The stress of the prophecy seemed to age her in seconds. Boaz's father entered the room at that exact moment. He moved fast, his eyes locked on his wife's distressed face. "What is wrong?" his father asked, sliding into the seat beside her. "Why didn't anyone tell me you were awake?" Before Boaz could explain the goddess or the history of Queen Afi, the door slammed open. Caleb, the pack beta, stood there breathless. "Alpha, rogues are heading toward the borders," Caleb barked. "The fight is coming to them." Will Boaz and Hadassah be ready for the war that's brewing? And what role will Boaz's parents play in uncovering the secrets of their royal past? The kingdom is awakening, but so are its enemies. The full story awaits. And trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment of this epic tale. Subscribe now to wolfpackromance.co to read ahead and uncover all the secrets of the Zion Kingdom. We have new chapters dropping regularly, so make sure you hit that notification bell. And feel free to comment your thoughts below, maybe even share this with your crush. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next part of the story.
Boaz and his father bolted upright at the same time. The air in the room changed instantly. Fear for the pack and their mate spiked through them. Boaz didn't waste a second. He slammed into the pack mind link, his mental voice booming like thunder in the heads of every member. "Warriors, get to your positions," Boaz commanded. "Border patrols, hold the line until I arrive. Women and children, get to the bunkers now. Do not leave until I give the word." Boaz's blood boiled. The audacity of these outsiders to threaten his land and his family was more than he could stand. He felt a surge of pure fury. He turned and grabbed Hadassah's hand. He didn't say a word, but his grip was firm as he pulled her through the chaotic halls of the pack house. People were running in every direction. The sound of heavy boots and panicked whispers filled the air. When they reached the heavy steel doors of the bunker, Boaz stopped. He turned to Hadassah and cupped her face with his palms. He touched her skin as if she were made of glass. "Stay here until I return," Boaz told her. "Do not open this door for anyone. I will knock 3 times when I come back for you. Do you understand?" He didn't want to let go. The thought of leaving her behind while he went toward danger made his wolf growl in protest. Hadassah reached out and grabbed his hand before he could turn away. "Be safe," she whispered. "I need you here with me." She didn't wait for a reply. She turned and disappeared into the bunker, her face flushing a deep red. Boaz watched the door close and then he was moving. He sprinted out of the pack house and into the cool forest air. The transformation started mid-stride. His clothes tore into rags as his bones snapped and reshaped themselves. Thick gray fur sprouted across his skin. Within seconds, a massive gray wolf hit the forest floor. He took off toward the eastern border. The trees became a green blur and the dry leaves crunched under his heavy paws. "Caleb, what is the status?" Boaz sent the message through the link. "It is strange, Alpha," Caleb replied. "They aren't attacking. They are just standing there in human form. It looks like they are waiting for someone." Confusion replaced some of Boaz's anger. Rogues didn't just stand around in human form. He slowed his pace as he approached the clearing. He saw his father's brown wolf and Caleb's blonde-furred form standing guard. Across from them stood a group of strangers. They smelled of sweat and old blood. Boaz stepped behind a large oak tree and shifted back. He grabbed a pair of sweatpants hanging from a low branch, a common sight on pack territory. Once he was dressed, he walked out into the clearing with a steady, predatory gait. "What brings you to my lands?" Boaz demanded. His alpha voice echoed through the trees, vibrating in the chests of everyone present. One of the men from the group stepped forward. He didn't growl or bare his teeth. Instead, he lowered his head and bowed deeply. "Your Highness," the man said. "I am Jethro, the head warrior of the royal family." Boaz stopped in his tracks. He looked at the ragged group of men. They didn't look like royals. They looked like they had been through a war. "The royal family has been gone for decades," Boaz said, his eyes narrowing. "Why come to me now?" Jethro looked up, his expression grim. Because the bloodline has returned, and the shadows are right behind us. Boaz felt the hair on his neck stand up. He looked back toward the bunkers where Hadassah was hiding. He thought about the moon goddess and the ancient souls she mentioned. The pieces of a much larger puzzle were starting to click into place, and he didn't like the picture they were forming. "Tell me everything," Boaz ordered. "And start with why you think I won't kill you where you stand." Jethro took a shaky breath and stepped closer, holding out a small silver crest. "Because your mate is the key to everything we are trying to protect." "Jethro, oh Jethro, where are you?" The moon goddess skipped through the stone corridors of the earthly castle. Her voice rang out with a brightness that didn't match the heavy shadows of the hall. Jethro heard the call and broke into a run. His boots thudded against the floor as he rounded the corner. He found the goddess glowing with an inner light that made the torches on the walls look dim. He immediately dropped to one knee and bowed his head. "Luna," Jethro said. He breathed heavily from the sprint. "You didn't send word that you were coming. What brings you down to the realm?" The goddess bounced on the balls of her feet. A wide, childish grin stretched across her face. "The souls found them, Jethro. They finally found them." Jethro felt a jolt of electricity run through his chest. He had waited centuries for this news. He had trained every day for a king and queen who didn't yet exist. The destined ones? The souls truly found the hosts? Yes. Luna turned and started up the grand staircase. Her feet barely seemed to touch the marble. "I want you to gather the royal warriors. You must head to their pack immediately. There is no time to waste." Jethro stood up. He was already reaching for his mind link, the telepathic connection buzzing in the back of his brain. "Which pack, Luna? Where are we going?" "The Judah pack," she called over her shoulder. She sounded like a girl who had just been told a wonderful secret. "Go now. They are waiting, even if they don't know it yet." "We are leaving this second," Jethro promised. He didn't wait for a dismissal. He sprinted toward the warriors' wing of the castle. By the time he reached the heavy oak doors of the exit, his second-in-command, Embry, was already there. 10 other warriors stood in a perfect line behind him. They looked sharp, but their eyes were filled with confusion. "What is the emergency, Val?" Embry asked. He gripped the hilt of his training sword. "Is the castle under attack?" Jethro shook his head. He was grinning so hard his cheeks ached. "You remember the stories I told you? About King Melchizedek and Queen Afi? About the ancient souls that were promised to return?" Embry nodded slowly. Some of the younger recruits looked at each other, whispering in the back of the line. They were new. To them, those names were just legends used to keep pups quiet at night. "The souls found their new bodies," Jethro announced. He punched Embry lightly on the shoulder. "We're going to the Judah pack to bring our king and queen home." Embry's eyes went wide. A massive smile broke across his face. "The Judah pack? Why are we still standing here talking? Move out." The group scrambled toward the black SUVs parked in the courtyard. Jethro and Embry jumped into the lead vehicle. The engine roared to life, and the small convoy tore out of the castle gates. The drive took an hour, but to Jethro, it felt like an eternity. Every minute they spent on the road was a minute the new royals were unprotected. Jethro signaled the drivers to stop about 10 minutes away from the Judah pack's border. He didn't want to look like an invading army. He wanted to show respect. As they stepped out of the cars, the air changed. The scent of pine and dried blood hit Jethro's nose. "I can smell the patrol," Embry whispered. "They're panicking." "Stay calm," Jethro ordered. "We walk the rest of the way. Do not draw your weapons unless I do." Jethro led the way. As they approached the invisible line of the border, the bushes rustled. Several large wolves stepped out. Their fur was brindled and gray, their lips pulled back to show sharp white teeth. They growled, a low vibration that shook the leaves on the ground. In the center of the pack stood an older man. He wasn't shifted, but his posture was rigid. Jethro recognized him as the former alpha. The man looked terrified. A few seconds later, the trees parted. A massive wolf stepped forward. He was larger than any wolf Jethro had ever seen. His fur was as black as a starless night, and his eyes held a golden fire that seemed to pierce right through Jethro's soul. The power coming off him was like a physical weight pressing down on the clearing. The black wolf disappeared behind a large oak tree. A moment later, a man stepped out. He was tall, muscled, and wearing a pair of dark pants he'd grabbed from a nearby branch. He walked toward the royal warriors with the stride of a predator. "What brings you here, rogues?" the alpha demanded. His voice wasn't just loud, it carried the alpha command. It was a frequency that forced submission. Jethro felt his knees buckle. Beside him, Embry and the other warriors dropped to the dirt, unable to fight the power of the true king. Jethro forced his head up, even as his body bowed low to the grass. "Your Highness," Jethro strained to speak through the pressure. "I am Jethro. I am the head warrior of the royal family, and we have come to take you to your throne." The alpha narrowed his eyes. "I don't have a throne. I have a pack to protect. Explain yourself before I tear your throat out." "The royal warriors are waiting in the office," Caleb said, his voice tight with the stress of the morning. Boaz nodded. He looked toward the heavy door of the bunker where his family remained hidden. "Get the women and the pups back to their homes. The immediate threat is over, but keep the sentries on high alert." He strode toward the bunker entrance and knocked 3 times. It was the signal he had promised. The heavy door groaned open, and his mother stood there with a worried frown. Hadassah was right behind her, looking small and pale in the shadows. "Are they gone?" "What happened?" his mother asked. "They are here for me and Hadassah," Boaz said. He reached out to guide them toward the stairs. "They are royal warriors from the Zion kingdom. The moon goddess told us this might happen. We need to go to the office." Inside the office, the atmosphere was suffocating. Jethro sat in a chair with a man Boaz didn't recognize standing beside him. His father and Caleb were in the corner. They looked like they were ready for a fight to break out at any moment. Boaz took his seat behind the desk and tried to look like a king in waiting. "So, tell me. What brings you here, Jethro?" "The moon goddess came to the kingdom today," Jethro said. His tone was stern and formal. "She told us about our new queen and king. She ordered us to escort you to the castle as soon as possible." Boaz leaned back. "But the moon goddess said we could go to the kingdom whenever we wanted. She gave us that choice in her realm." The man beside Jethro spoke up for the first time. "We are just following orders." Boaz looked him over. "And who are you?" The man smiled and gave a slight bow. "Abner, the second commander, Your Highness." "And if I come with you, who is going to rule this pack?" Boaz asked. He looked at his father and then back at the warriors. "I am worried about my people." "The pack will become a part of the Zion kingdom," Abner said. He spoke with a lot of confidence. "And the no-man land between the kingdom and the pack will be claimed. We will build it up so it belongs to the kingdom too." Boaz took a deep breath. It was a lot to process. He needed to talk to his people. He closed his eyes and pushed his voice into the pack mind link. "Pack meeting in 2 minutes," he commanded. He looked at his beta. "Caleb, go and make sure everyone is out there." Caleb nodded and walked out to handle the crowd. Boaz turned back to Jethro and Abner. "We are having a meeting. I am going to tell them what has been happening these past few days." Boaz stood up and grabbed Hadassah's shoulder. He gently pulled her with him toward his private room. He needed a moment alone with her before facing the crowd. Once the door was closed, he turned to her. "Are you comfortable with us being there?" he asked. "In the castle, I mean." Hadassah looked down at the floor. Her cheeks turned red. "It doesn't really matter. As long as you are comfortable." A wide smile broke across Boaz's face. He felt a rush of affection. "Well, aren't you adorable?" He wanted to hold her. The bond was pulling at him. "Can I hug you?" Hadassah looked up at him with her captivating eyes. She gave a small nod. Boaz pulled her toward him and wrapped his arms around her. A sense of total calmness took over his mind. Tingles exploded through his body. She was so warm. He could feel his wolf purring like a giant cat inside his chest. "Let's go tell our pack about the kingdom," Boaz said. "We need to choose some warriors to come with us too." Hadassah looked at him with a confused expression. "Our?" "Yes," Boaz said. He reached down and took her hand. "You will be the Luna sooner or later. They are your people and your pack just as much as they are mine." He led her downstairs and outside the pack house. The entire pack was standing and waiting. Caleb and the royal warriors stood beside the wooden podium. Boaz walked toward the stage with his mate by his side. He cleared his throat. The noise of the crowd died down instantly when they felt his alpha voice. "These past 2 days were eventful," Boaz began. "Hadassah and I were called to the realm of the moon goddess. She told us that 2 souls chose our bodies to be the new king and queen of the Zion kingdom." The pack started whispering. People were looking at each other in shock. "Today, we thought we were under attack," Boaz continued. "But they are not rogues. They are royal warriors from the kingdom. They were sent by the moon goddess to escort us to the castle." The crowd started shouting questions all at once. "If you go, who will rule us? What is going to happen to our homes?" "Silent. Listen first," Caleb shouted. Boaz nodded to his beta. "Firstly, the pack will join the kingdom. The royal warriors will help us take over the no-man land. We will be safe." He looked over at Gideon, his best friend and the gamma of the pack. "While I am away at the kingdom, Gideon will be in charge," Boaz announced. "If anyone disobeys him, they will be punished by me personally." Gideon gave a wide grin and stood a little taller. "Caleb will be coming with me," Boaz added. "If anyone wants to leave the kingdom, I will call the alphas of nearby packs to let you join them. No one is forced to stay." He stepped off the podium and walked back to Hadassah. He found Gideon in the crowd. "Gideon, if anyone wants to leave, let me know. And find out which warriors want to move to the kingdom. Tell them to pack their bags. We leave early in the morning." Gideon saluted and headed off to work. Boaz intertwined his fingers with Hadassah's hand. He led her toward the garage where his Audi R8 was parked. He felt a small tug on his shirt. He looked down at Hadassah. Her eyes were soft. "What is it?" "Where?" she asked in her raspy voice. "We are going to the mall to get you some clothes," Boaz said with a smile. Hadassah frowned a little. "You don't have to." "I have to," Boaz insisted. "You are my mate and I want the best for you." She looked down, blushing again. Boaz opened the car door for her. Once she was inside, he jogged to the driver's side. He didn't want to take any risks. "Caleb, send a couple of guards behind us to the mall," Boaz said through the mind link. They drove to the mall in a comfortable silence. Boaz could see the guard cars following in the rearview mirror. When they arrived, he parked and ran around to open Hadassah's door. "You can buy anything," Boaz told her as they walked toward the entrance. "Don't hesitate. I am paying for everything." The mall was crowded with humans. He could smell a few of his pack members in the crowd too. They spent 3 hours shopping for dresses and essentials. Afterward, they ate in the food court before heading back to the pack house. They had a long journey ahead of them. They spent the evening packing their suitcases and getting ready. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Boaz asked. Hadassah looked at the bags and then back at him. "I am ready if you are." "The alphas are waiting by the western gate, so try to finish up quickly," Boaz said. Hadassah looked up from her suitcase and nodded. She watched her mate turn to leave the room. He looked tired from managing the pack. When he called the bedroom our room before he walked out, a heat crawled up her neck. She turned back to her packing, her face a blushing mess. The house outside was a storm of noise. People shouted to one another across the halls. Tape snapped against cardboard boxes. Best friends stood in the driveway saying tearful goodbyes. Hadassah felt like a quiet observer in the middle of the chaos. She folded a soft sweater and tucked it into her bag. A soft knock sounded at the door. Hadassah froze. She was not used to visitors when Boaz was not there to shield her. The door creaked open a few inches. Miriam, Caleb's sister, peeked inside. Her eyes were wide and full of a nervous energy. "Do you need help, Luna?" Miriam asked. Hadassah shook her head slowly. She reached for the small notebook on the nightstand. Boaz had given it to her so she could communicate without the strain of her voice. "Can I sit with you?" Miriam stepped into the room. Hadassah felt a spark of warmth in her chest. It was nice to have someone want to stay. She patted the bed cover beside her. Miriam closed the door and sat on the edge of the mattress. She looked at Hadassah's wrists, then quickly looked away. Hadassah knew what she saw. The bruises and the thin lines of white scars were hard to hide. Hadassah flipped to a fresh page in her notebook. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" she wrote. Miriam laughed softly, though her hand shook a little. "No. Honestly, I was just hesitating. I wanted to talk to you, but I was worried. So, here I am." Hadassah tilted her head. She began to scrawl across the paper. "Hesitating? Why?" "I am socially awkward," Miriam admitted. She looked down at her lap. "And you seemed so fragile. When you were unconscious on the bed, I saw the marks. I did not want to say anything that might trigger a bad memory." Hadassah looked at the faint purple marks on her own skin. She did not feel fragile today. She felt like a survivor. She wrote quickly. "My scars and bruises are just the colors of my battles." Miriam read the words and her entire face changed. A wide, genuine smile broke across her lips. She looked at Hadassah with something that looked like pride. "I want to be brave like that," Miriam whispered. She leaned in closer. "Can we be friends?" Hadassah paused. The word felt heavy and strange. She remembered the friend she had long ago. Her father had taken that person away. For years, she stayed alone to keep others safe from him. But her father was gone now. The cage was open. "I would love to," Hadassah wrote. Miriam did not wait. She lunged forward and pulled Hadassah into a tight hug. Hadassah gasped, then slowly relaxed into the embrace. It felt like safety. "Let's play 20 questions," Miriam suggested as she pulled back. "I want to know everything. Like your name. Are you named after anyone?" "I like it so much." Hadassah smiled. She remembered her mother's voice. She remembered the way her mother's hands felt, soft and smelling of flowers. "Hadassah means flowery ray in French," she wrote. "Mom said she named me that because she thought of flowers the moment she saw me." As she wrote the words, her eyes began to sting. The memory of her mother was a beautiful ache. Miriam noticed the shift immediately. She reached out and patted Hadassah's shoulder. "Hey, it is okay to feel that," Miriam said softly. "My second-grade teacher, Mrs. Macaulay, used to ask us how we felt on a scale of 1 to 10. But I never liked numbers. They would always twist and rebel against my mind. So I chose to speak in colors instead." Hadassah wiped a stray tear and watched Miriam with interest. "Color of mint chocolate ice cream means that I am calm," Miriam explained with a grin. "Bruises of blues and violets, these are unhappy colors. If I am every color in the rainbow, I am super happy and calm. When I am gray, I am silent." Miriam took Hadassah's hand. "I am as yellow as the school bus when I am free. Dark blue as the skies at night means I am overwhelmed. So, my dear friend and Luna, let's use this tactic. Let's tell each other how we feel in colors. Let it be something special between us." Hadassah had never felt this happy. Her heart felt like it was dancing. She felt a small sting of regret for not approaching Miriam sooner, but she knew it was the fear that had held her back. She pulled Miriam into another warm hug. She cried on her shoulder, promising herself that she would never let this friend slip away. Miriam tightened her arms. She seemed to be making a promise of her own. She would stay by Hadassah's side through joy or blood. Okay, enough of the emotional thingies, Miriam said, laughing as she pulled away. Come on, ask me. Hadassah wiped her tears and picked up the pen. What do you fear the most? Let's see, Miriam said. I think I am afraid of overthinking. It just leads to another creepy and sad world where I think people are judging me. Miriam looked at the boxes stacked in the corner of the room. Do you like reading books? Hadassah's eyes lit up. I do like them a lot, she wrote. I read Turtles all the way down about 6 times and I am not bored with it. Hadassah thought about the old bookstore. She could never afford to buy them, so she would sit against the roof and read until her father found her. If he caught her, he would take them away. Now, things were different. I am obsessed with books, Miriam said. I packed about 4 huge boxes of them. And that is not even half. We can share them whenever you want. They sat on the bed for hours as the pack moved around them. They talked about stories and the colors of their moods. For the first time, the move did not feel like a scary escape. It felt like a beginning. Do you think the new house will have a big library? Miriam asked. Hadassah smiled and wrote her answer with a steady hand. If it doesn't, we will make Boaz and Caleb build us one, Miriam joked. Hadassah laughed silently, her shoulders shaking. She felt yellow. Bright, school bus yellow. Promise me we will stay this close even after we leave? Miriam asked, her voice turning serious. Hadassah took the pen and wrote in big, bold letters. I am never letting you go. The paperwork is finished, so you are free to leave for the Northern Territories by dawn, Boaz said, sliding the folder across the mahogany desk. The young werewolf across from him gripped the edges of the folder. He looked relieved but hesitant. Boaz knew the feeling. Breaking away from a pack was never easy, even when it was for the best. You really found a job for me there? The boy asked. His voice was shaky. Boaz nodded. He leaned back in his leather chair. I called the Alpha myself. You will work in their archives. It is steady work. You will have a small apartment and a fresh start. No one there cares about what happened here before the transition. Thank you, Alpha. Truly. Go on, Boaz said with a small wave of his hand. Pack your things. Don't look back. As the door clicked shut, Boaz felt a wave of peace wash over him. It was not his own peace. It was coming from the bond. Hadassah was nearby, and her heart was light. The golden thread between them hummed with a quiet happiness that made his own wolf, Ari, pace circles in the back of his mind. I am coming, Boaz muttered under his breath. He stood up and gathered his remaining files. Caleb, his beta, stood by the window watching the sunset. Caleb looked tired. The restructuring of the pack had taken a toll on everyone. Go home, Caleb, Boaz said. You have done enough for today. Spend time with your sister. I plan to, Caleb replied. He offered a short, tired grin. Miriam is already up at the main house with Hadassah. They are probably gossiping about us. Boaz chuckled. He grabbed his jacket and headed out. Every step toward the residential wing felt like a pull on a leash. Ari was whining now. The wolf had been restless for hours. He wanted to be near Hadassah. He wanted to scent her. Boaz had to exert a bit of mental pressure to keep the wolf from trying to force a shift right in the hallway. He reached the master suite and pushed the door open softly. Hadassah was sitting on the edge of the bed. She had a notebook balanced on her knees. Her pen moved quickly across the page. Miriam sat in the chair nearby, laughing at something Hadassah had just said. The room smelled like vanilla and rain. It was the scent of home. Boaz cleared his throat. He leaned against the doorframe. Hadassah looked up. A wide smile broke across her face. The sight of it hit Boaz like a physical weight in his chest. Every time she looked at him like that, the world felt a little more stable. "I am going to leave," Miriam said. She stood up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She gave Hadassah a quick squeeze on the shoulder. "I will see you tomorrow, Luna." "Good night, Alpha." "Good night, Miriam," Boaz said. He waited until the door closed before he walked over to the bed. He sat down next to Hadassah. He did not say anything at first. He just reached out and took her hand. The moment their skin touched, the sparks flared. It was a buzzing, electric heat that traveled up his arm. Hadassah did not pull away. She leaned into him. She was getting used to this. She was getting used to him. "Hi," she whispered. "Hey," Boaz replied. He squeezed her fingers. "Ari was going to go crazy if he did not hear your voice soon. He has been a brat all afternoon." Hadassah tilted her head. Her eyes were curious. "Ari?" Boaz realized he had never mentioned the name. He felt a bit of shame. He had shared his bed and his life with her, but he had kept the most primal part of himself behind a curtain. "Ari. He is my wolf," Boaz explained. Inside his mind, Ari began to pout. The wolf sent images of himself sitting in a dark corner, looking lonely and neglected. "I want to meet my mate," Ari growled. "Let me out." Boaz looked at Hadassah. He felt his pulse quicken. "He wants to meet you. Properly." Hadassah stiffened slightly. Her grip on his hand tightened. "How? I mean, I know you can shift, but how does he meet me here?" "I do not have to shift into the full wolf," Boaz said. He kept his voice low and gentle. "He can just take over my eyes and my voice. I will still be here. I will see everything and hear everything. But it will be him talking." Ari started whining again. He was practically begging. Hadassah looked at Boaz for a long moment. She searched his face for any sign of danger. Finally, she nodded. "Okay. I want to meet him." "My eyes will turn gold," Boaz warned. "That is how you will know it is him." He closed his eyes. He let the mental barrier drop. He stepped back into the shadows of his own mind and let Ari rush forward. It was a strange sensation. It felt like cold water rushing over his skin. When he opened his eyes again, his vision was sharper. Colors were more vibrant. "You are beautiful," Ari said. His voice was different. It was deeper. It had a rough, gravelly edge to it that Boaz usually kept hidden. Hadassah gasped softly. She stared into his golden eyes. A small shiver ran down her spine, but she did not look afraid. She reached out and touched his cheek. "Hey," she said. She was smiling. "Nice to meet you, Ari." Ari leaned his face into her palm. He let out a low, rumbling sound that was almost a purr. If he were in his four-legged form, his tail would be hitting the floor like a drum. "Nice to meet you, Hadassah," Ari said. "Can I hug you?" the wolf asked. He did not wait for an answer. He moved with a speed Boaz rarely used. He pulled Hadassah into his chest. He buried his face in the crook of her neck and inhaled deeply. Hadassah laughed. The sound was bright and clear. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held him back. "You are very excited," she teased. "The butthead did not let me out," Ari complained. He pulled back just enough to look at her. He kept his hands firmly on her waist. "Do not blame me if I am clingy. I have been waiting a long time for this." "I do not blame you," Hadassah said. She touched the tip of his nose. Boaz pushed from the inside. "It is getting late, Ari. Let her rest." Ari groaned. He looked at Hadassah and rolled his eyes. "Here he goes again. He is such a bore. He says it is late." Hadassah laughed again. She shook her head. He is right, though. We have a lot to do tomorrow. We should sleep. See? Boaz thought. She agrees with me. Ari huffed. Now they are both against me. This is unfair. We can talk again tomorrow, Hadassah promised. Ari leaned in and pressed a quick, firm kiss to her cheek. He lingered there for a second, scenting her one last time. Until next time, then, he said. He gave a small, playful salute. Then, the gold faded from Boaz's eyes. The sharp edges of the world blurred back into their normal shapes. Boaz was back in control. He is sweet, Hadassah said immediately. Boaz stood up and stretched. He headed toward the bathroom to change. He is a handful. And he is very loud. I like him, Hadassah called out. Boaz smiled to himself as he pulled on a clean shirt. He walked back into the bedroom and saw Hadassah already tucked under the covers. She was wearing one of his old t-shirts. It was far too big for her. The sight made his heart skip. He climbed in beside her and pulled the blanket up. He reached out and drew her close. She tucked her head under his chin. The room was quiet. The only sound was the steady beat of their hearts. Boaz, she whispered. Yeah? Tell Ari I said goodnight. How could you do this, mother? Keziah screamed. Her voice cracked like a breaking glacier. Athaliah stood in the center of the throne room. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like a queen. She smoothed her robes and smiled. It was a cold, sharp look that didn't reach her eyes. What is wrong, Keziah? Athaliah asked. Her tone was light. She sounded like she was asking about the weather. You seem upset. Keziah felt the lava pumping through her veins. It was hot. It was angry. Her skin began to crack at the joints. Glowing orange light spilled from the gaps in her arms. Above her head, dark storm clouds gathered. They swirled in a tight circle, mimicking the hurricane building in her chest. You disappeared for years, Keziah yelled. She took a step forward. The stone floor frosted over where her feet touched, then immediately cracked from the heat of her core. You come back and brag about destroying the Zion kingdom. Why? Why would you kill thousands of innocent people? The other two sisters stood in the shadows. Zipporah stood to the left. Her hair was a wild mess of black curls and flickering embers. Smoke rose from her skin in thin, gray ribbons. Ada stood to the right. Her blue hair hung damp against her neck. Her brown eyes looked like deep, drowning pools. They were silent, but their power filled the room. Athaliah folded her arms. Her voice remained toneless. They had to die, Keziah. It is simple math. I must control those realms. Only I can bring true peace. You did wrong, Athaliah, Ada said. Her voice was steady. It was the sound of a calm sea before a massive wave. Athaliah turned to her second daughter. She laughed. Stop glaring, darlings. I hurt people so I can live. I strip them of their magic so you three can stay strong. I am a provider. You should be thanking me. Zipporah stepped out of the dark. Sparks popped on her lips as she spoke. I pray you never take a single breath without remembering the lives you stole. The air in the room grew heavy. The smell of ozone and burning wood was thick. Athaliah didn't flinch. She looked at the three 16-year-old girls with pity. You cannot stop me, Athaliah said. She reached out a hand as if to pat Zipporah's cheek. I created you. I made you from pieces of my own soul. I own your breath. I own your will. Keziah looked at her sisters. A slow, dark grin spread across her face. The lava beneath her skin pulsed brighter. The wind whipped her mossy hair around her face like a crown of vines. Oh, mother, Ada said. She was grinning too. You really are getting old. You are becoming useless, Keziah added. She felt a sudden wave of comfort. The heavy chains of her mother's magic felt brittle now. You were so busy killing kings that you didn't notice. We broke the bonds. We are not your puppets anymore. Athaliah's face went pale. She tried to raise her hands to cast a spell, but Zipporah moved faster. Calder shall fall upon you, Zipporah shouted. She slammed her hands onto the floor. The ground groaned. Somewhere deep below the castle, a volcano answered her call. Celestial shall take you, Keziah cried out. She threw her arms wide. The wind in the room turned into a screaming gale. It pulled at Athaliah's clothes, dragging her toward the shadows of the spirit world. Malacia shall take you away. Ada finished the ritual. She gestured toward the floor. The stone turned into a dark, swirling whirlpool of salt water. Athaliah screamed. It wasn't a scream of anger anymore. It was pure terror. The three powers hit her at once. Fire burned her pride. The wind stripped her defense. The water pulled her down into the dark. I will come back. Athaliah shrieked as her body began to fade into the gray mist of the Witchlands. When the new king and queen are found, I will return for your heads. Then, she was gone. The throne room fell silent. The storm clouds vanished. The lava in Keziah's veins cooled down to a dull simmer. She looked at her sisters. They were alone in the Edom castle now. The war was over for today, but the prophecy hung in the air. We stay hidden until the day she crawls back, Keziah whispered. Zipporah nodded, wiping soot from her forehead. And when she does, we finish this. Keziah looked out the window at the ruined horizon. Let her try to find us. Are you still with me, Hadassah? Boaz's voice was low and steady. It pulled her back from the edge of a memory. Hadassah blinked. Her lungs burned as she sucked in the midnight air. Her skin felt damp. The nightmares always chose the same time to strike. They played like a twisted movie in her mind. Monsters with jagged teeth. The smell of old blood. The cold weight of chains. They weren't just dreams. They were reminders of the pain she survived. Hadassah felt a warm hand on her cheek. Boaz moved closer. He didn't ask her what she saw. He just pulled her into his chest. He stroked her hair with a slow, rhythmic motion. I've got you, he whispered. Go back to sleep. I'm right here. Hadassah leaned into his heat. The terror in her chest began to melt. She closed her eyes. The dark didn't feel so heavy when he was holding her. She drifted off to the sound of his heartbeat. Boaz didn't sleep. He watched her for a long time. The moonlight hit the silver strands of her hair. He felt a sharp tug in his chest. He thanked the moon goddess for her every single day. Hadassah had changed his world without even trying. He wasn't sure he could ever find the right words to tell her. She was his soulmate. His only one. When the sun finally hit the windows at 8 in the morning, the house was already humming. They moved through the routine like a well-oiled machine. Showers. Packing. Dragging heavy suitcases down the stairs. Good morning, Miriam shouted. She practically bounced toward Hadassah. Before Hadassah could react, Miriam pulled her into a tight hug. It was a squeeze that knocked the breath out of her. Hadassah pulled back with a small smile. She reached for her notebook and flipped to a clean page. She scribbled a few words and turned it around. Good morning to you too, the note read. Boaz walked up behind them. He slid his arm over Hadassah's shoulders. His touch was firm. It grounded her. Time to move out, girls, Boaz said. The cars are packed. Hadassah leaned her head against his shoulder. A spark of excitement flickered in her stomach. It felt like she was meeting him for the first time all over again. Every time he touched her, she wanted to be closer. She wanted this life. She wanted every morning to start in his arms. Outside, the driveway was full of cars. Pack members were tossing bags into trunks. The air felt electric. Adarion could feel the change coming. Emery and Jethro stood at the front of the line. They looked like statues. The royal warriors stood behind them, ready to lead the way. "Let's go home," Jethro called out. The journey started. It was a long crawl toward the Zion lands. The line of cars stretched down the road. At every hour, the convoy slowed down. They had to stop for water. The mothers in the pack needed time to feed their babies. Hadassah watched the trees change through the window. The further they drove, the older the forest looked. The air grew thicker with magic. Finally, the landscape shifted. The borders of the Zion kingdom appeared. The warriors signaled ahead. They sent word to the maids and the castle guard. The king and queen were coming. Underscore 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 underscore. Far away, in a place where the sun didn't reach, a young witch sprinted down a stone hallway. Her boots clicked against the floor of the dark castle. Her breath came in short, happy gasps. "My lady! My lady!" The girl burst into the room. It was cold inside. Shadows seemed to cling to the walls like ink. A woman sat in a high-backed chair. She didn't look up. Her eyes remained fixed on a spot on the floor. "What is it, Mia?" the lady asked. Her voice was flat. It sounded like dry leaves scraping together. "I don't have the energy for your noise." Mia didn't lose her smile. She leaned forward, her eyes bright with news. "They're here," Mia whispered. "The new king and queen of the Zion kingdom. They just crossed the border." The lady froze. A slow, jagged smile spread across her face. It wasn't a kind expression. It looked like a predator finding its prey. "Is that so?" Witch Athaliah stood up. Her long robes trailed behind her like a shadow. "Inform the army, Mia. Tell them to prepare." The young girl nodded eagerly. She turned on her heel and ran out to spread the word. Athaliah walked toward the window. She looked out toward the distant Zion lands. "Watch out, little royals," Athaliah hissed. "Here I come." The wind carried the scent of autumn leaves as Keziah stood on the edge of the royal lands. She watched a cluster of tiny, wispy clouds drift through the air, almost as if they were playing with the strands of her hair. With a gentle shooing motion, she cleared the birds from her shoulders and turned toward the girl with the flaming red hair. Her expression remained steady and serious. "They are on Zion's kingdom lands now," Keziah said. Her voice was soft, but the weight of the news was heavy. Zipporah narrowed her mahogany eyes. A flash of anger crossed her face as she processed the location. "So, she is coming back after all." Ada stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "We have to move on. There is no time to linger on the past." Keziah nodded, looking back toward the rooms where the others waited. "Call your mate, Zipporah. He needs to be here for this." Outside the heavy iron gates, the sound of car engines died down. Boaz stepped out onto the gravel, followed by his mate, his parents, and the rest of the pack members. For a moment, everyone stood in silence, gaping at the sight before them. A massive castle loomed over the green horizon. It looked like something out of a legend, guarded by rows of skeletal trees with crimson leaves that swayed in the chilly breeze. The iron gates creaked open, revealing a path that led past a delicate marble fountain. The water made a melodic gurgling sound that filled the quiet air. Neatly trimmed hedges lined the perimeter, and the castle windows were draped with royal blue curtains that caught the afternoon sun. Jethro led the group inside. As they crossed the threshold, the black and white linoleum floors glowed under the chandeliers. The space was spotless and smelled of fresh wax. A grand staircase dominated the center of the foyer, climbing high toward the vaulted ceiling. A sharp throat-clearing sound echoed through the hall, drawing every eye toward the front. Jethro stood tall with Abner by his side. The Alpha and his mate have their own floor, Jethro explained, gesturing upward. It is the top level of the castle for maximum privacy and security. Abner added a soft smile. The Alpha's family will reside on the floor directly below. The Beta's family is on the floor below them. Some pack members will stay here in the main building, while others will be situated in the houses surrounding the castle grounds. Abner turned toward Boaz and Hadassah, bowing slightly. I will lead the way to your floor, your highnesses. As they walked through the long hallways, Hadassah looked at the walls in awe. They were lined with portraits of wolves and ancient ancestors, all framed in gold. The white walls featured intricate carvings along the edges. When they reached the end of the hall, they stepped into a silver elevator. Hadassah felt a sudden spark of anxiety. She didn't like small, enclosed spaces, they made her feel like she was trapped in a dark box. Her hand moved instinctively to find Boaz's. He felt her tension immediately and pulled her closer, offering a silent squeeze of reassurance. The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open to reveal a stunning living area. Lavender curtains fringed with lace billowed in the spring breeze coming through a cracked window. The walls were a soft cream color, and the matching lavender couches looked plush and inviting. This floor is yours, Abner said as he set their suitcases down near the entrance. It features 3 bedrooms, a master suite, a full kitchen, an office, and a library. With a final polite smile, he turned back to the elevator and left them alone. Hadassah walked across the glowing marble floor, her eyes wide. It's amazing, she whispered. She walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling estate. It's just so big. It feels a bit overwhelming with all the guards and the size of it all. Boaz walked up behind her and wrapped an arm around her shoulder. You will get used to it, Hadassah. This is home now. We should probably start unpacking, she suggested, looking at the pile of luggage. Boaz frowned slightly, his mind already drifting to the safety of the perimeter. I need to check on the warriors and the guards first. I have a feeling peace won't last long. Besides, we have to return to school tomorrow. We've missed too many classes. He leaned down and kissed her forehead gently before heading back to the elevator. Once he was gone, Hadassah began moving the suitcases down the long hallway. She explored the rooms as she went. The first door on the left opened into a large office with dark leather couches and a sturdy wooden desk. The next door led to a massive library. The smell of old paper and polished wood filled the air, and Hadassah felt a rush of joy. She loved books, they were her favorite way to escape reality. Finally, she reached the master bedroom. The air here smelled of lavender and vanilla. A king-sized bed with elegant gray covers sat in the center of the room. She pushed open a set of sliding glass doors and stepped onto a private balcony. From here, she could see the green fields where wolves ran and children played in the distance. She felt a sense of peace until the elevator dinged again. She hurried back to the living room, wondering if Boaz had forgotten something, but she found Miriam standing there instead. Hey! Miriam giggled, waving a hand. I thought I'd come up for a quick visit. Hadassah felt a wave of relief. Having a friend nearby made the giant castle feel a lot less lonely. She grabbed a notebook from her bag and sat on the couch with Miriam. Since Hadassah preferred writing her thoughts, she quickly jotted down a few words about the decor colors they had discussed earlier. Dark blue and mint chocolate chip, Miriam read aloud, her eyes bright. I love those choices. It's going to look great. She paused, looking at Hadassah more closely. Are you doing okay? I know becoming a queen and learning about werewolves is a lot to take in at once. Hadassah wrote a quick response, I am calm because I have people like you and Boaz by my side. Miriam beamed. I'm so glad I can help. Is there anything else you need? Hadassah bit her lip and wrote, Can you help me unpack? It's okay if you're busy. I would love to help, Miriam said, jumping up. I don't have anything else to do in this giant place anyway. Downstairs, Boaz found Jethro near the main entrance. The warrior immediately stood at attention. Alpha, Jethro said. Do you need anything? Is there a problem? I want you to double the warriors on the borders, Boaz ordered, his voice firm. And place more guards in the hallways of the castle. I have a bad feeling that something is coming. We need to be ready for anything. Jethro nodded, looking eager to prove himself. I will inform the men immediately. I'll get Caleb to help coordinate the shifts so he can mind-link me if there's any movement. Rest easy, Alpha. Jethro bowed and headed toward the barracks. After a long afternoon of organizing the new home, the sun began to set over the kingdom. Hadassah and Miriam finished the last of the suitcases just as Boaz returned. After a quiet dinner and a chance to wash up, the couple finally collapsed into the large bed, exhausted from the move. As the moon rose over the skeletal trees, Boaz looked at Hadassah in the dim light. Tomorrow, everything changes again when we walk through those school doors, Boaz said. Reuben, we are heading to the castle, Zipporah said. She stood by the large bed where Reuben lay. His topaz blue eyes tracked her every move, reflecting a storm of unspoken thoughts. Zipporah sat on the edge of the mattress and took his hand. She ran her thumb over his knuckles, her touch light and steady. Are they there yet? Reuben asked. His voice was thick with sleep. Yes, Zipporah whispered. They arrived this morning. Across the castle, Hadassah woke to a different kind of warmth. Boaz's muscular arms were locked around her, pulling her back against his chest. She blinked at the golden alarm clock on the nightstand. The red numbers showed 7:04 a.m. She wanted to stay in the heat of the blankets, but the first bell for school wouldn't wait for a queen. Hadassah moved slowly. She peeled Boaz's heavy arm off her waist, holding her breath so he wouldn't stir. She slipped out of bed and padded toward the bathroom. The cold air hit her skin, making her shiver until she stepped into the steaming spray of the shower. In the bedroom, Boaz opened his eyes the moment the bathroom door clicked shut. The bed felt empty without her. He sat up and reached for the mental link that connected him to his lead warrior. Gideon, you up? Boaz asked. Unfortunately, Gideon's voice echoed in his head. I'm getting ready to face the 6 cruelest hours of our lives. Why did humans invent high school? Stop complaining, Boaz projected a mental chuckle. Check on the others and make sure the security detail is ready. Yes sir, Alpha King, Gideon replied with a hint of sarcasm. Boaz shook his head and stood up. He stretched, his joints popping in the quiet room. He had a lot to handle today. Gideon was staying at the castle for a week to help reorganize the guards before heading back to their home pack. The bathroom door opened. Hadassah stepped out, dressed in a soft pink sweater and blue jeans. She looked small and bright. Boaz stood there shirtless, his chest bare. Good morning, Boaz said. Hadassah stopped in her tracks. A deep blush crept up her neck and stained her cheeks pink. She looked down at her shoes, clutching her hands together. Gee, good morning, she stuttered. Boaz walked over and kissed her forehead. The scent of her shampoo filled his senses. Go downstairs and get some breakfast, he told her. I'll be down in a minute. Hadassah felt a spark of joy at his touch. She grabbed her new backpack and the notebook she used to communicate. Instead of waiting for Boaz to lead the way, she stepped out into the hallway alone. She felt a new surge of courage as she rode the elevator down to the kitchen. When the doors opened, she didn't find an empty room. Ephron, the ancient spirit of the forests, sat on a stool. He wasn't alone. A young man with delicate features was tucked against Ephron's side, looking half asleep. Ephron looked up as Hadassah entered. Thanks to the mother of wolves, he could speak clearly in the human tongue now. He nudged his partner. Good morning, Your Highness, Ephron said. He stood up and bowed deeply. Hadassah smiled and quickly flipped open her notebook. She wrote in neat, round letters. Good morning, Ephron. Who is this? This is Asher, my mate, Ephron said. He looked down at the younger man with a look of pure devotion. Forgive him, my queen. He is very grumpy in the morning. Asher didn't seem to care. He just groaned and buried his face deeper into Ephron's chest, seeking more warmth. Hadassah laughed silently. She wrote a quick response. It's okay. I have days like that too. Hadassah moved to the counter and served herself a stack of pancakes and some fresh fruit. She poured a glass of orange juice and sat across from the couple. She was curious about the newcomer. He didn't look like a werewolf. Is he a wolf too? She wrote. Ephron shook his head. He is not, Hadassah. If he isn't a wolf, what is he? He's a fae, Ephron explained. Hadassah paused with a piece of pancake on her fork. She had never heard that word before. The world was getting bigger every day, and it was a little overwhelming. What is a fae? Ephron leaned in, his eyes bright. They are magical beings from hidden lands. They stay away from the human world mostly. They have great power, and this little one can even turn into a tiny butterfly. Hadassah's eyes went wide. She looked at Asher, trying to imagine him with wings. I would like to see that one day, she wrote. She finished her breakfast and stood up to take her plate to the sink. It was an old habit from her old life, the life of chores and fear. Before she could reach the water, a maid rushed over and took the plate from her hands. Your Highness, please, the maid said gently. That's my job. You should rest before school. Hadassah felt a bit awkward. She wasn't used to being served. She was used to being the one who cleaned up the mess, usually while nursing bruises. Hey, a tired voice called out. Marissa walked into the kitchen, looking like she wanted to crawl back into bed. She grabbed a plate and slumped into a chair. I hate school, Marissa muttered. Reading and writing should be enough. I want to find whoever invented algebra and have a word with them. She looked up and noticed Ephron and Asher. Her eyes lingered on Ephron's long, white hair. Good morning, Hadassah, Marissa said, her mood lifting slightly. And who are these two? I am Ephron, the forest spirit said. And this is Asher. He's a fae. The kitchen soon filled up. Gideon arrived, followed by Caleb and his mate, Penina. Finally, Boaz walked in, looking sharp and ready for the day. The quiet morning peace vanished as the group finished their meals. Cars are out front, Boaz announced. Hadassah slung her backpack over her shoulder. She looked at her friends and her mate. The halls of a high school were a different kind of battlefield, but for the first time, she wasn't walking into it alone. Are you ready for this? Boaz asked, resting a hand on her shoulder. Hadassah nodded and wrote one last line in her book. As long as you stay close to me. Are you sure you want to stay in this empty classroom? Boaz's voice echoed against the cold tile walls. He stood in the doorway, his broad frame blocking the light from the hall. He didn't look angry, just confused. Hadassah didn't look up. Her fingers gripped the edges of her notebook until her knuckles turned white. She hated the lunchroom. In her old school, the cafeteria was a battlefield. The popular kids owned the center tables, and the outcasts huddled in the corners like they were waiting for a strike. Adding with Boaz and Marissa there, the thought of that loud, crowded hall made her stomach twist into knots. She opened her notebook and scribbled quickly. I don't like the lunch hall. Boaz stepped closer. He placed a hand on her shoulder, and the warmth of his palm seeped through her shirt. He didn't ask why she wouldn't speak. He just offered a small, encouraging smile. Come on, he said gently. The others are waiting. I won't let anyone bother you. He reached down and took her hand, pulling her up from the chair. Hadassah followed him, but her legs felt like lead. As they approached the double doors of the cafeteria, the noise began to swell. The clattering of trays sounded like gunfire. The roar of hundreds of voices felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. Hadassah stopped dead in the middle of the hallway. Hadassah? What is it? Boaz asked. She couldn't answer. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. The hallway began to warp. The lockers seemed to stretch and lean inward, and the floor felt like it was turning into water. She tried to breathe, but the air felt thin and sharp, like she was inhaling needles. "Hey, look at me," Boaz urged. His voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a deep well. Hadassah's knees gave out. She hit the floor, her breath coming in short, jagged gasps. Everything went dark at the edges of her vision. She felt hands on her arms, pulling her into a solid, warm chest. "Stay with me, Hadassah. Just breathe," Boaz whispered into her hair. He held her tight, shielding her from the students staring as they walked past. Slowly, the world stopped spinning. The pounding in her ears faded to a dull throb. She buried her face in Boaz's shirt, soaking in his scent. It was the only thing that felt real. "I know something is wrong," Boaz murmured. He pulled back just enough to look at her. "Please, talk to me." Hadassah shook her head. She didn't have the words. She just wanted to be somewhere quiet. Somewhere safe. "Can you stand?" he asked. She tried to move her legs, but they were still trembling. She shook her head again, fresh tears stinging her eyes. Without another word, Boaz hooked his arms under her knees and back. He lifted her easily, carrying her through the halls toward the exit. He didn't care about the whispers or the confused looks from the teachers. He walked straight to the parking lot where the black cars were waiting. One of the drivers jumped out and held the door open. Boaz slid into the back seat, still holding Hadassah close to his chest. "Are you okay?" The voice of Caleb, his beta, rang in Boaz's head through their mental link. "She had a panic attack," Boaz replied silently. "I'm taking her back to the castle. Tell the others we're gone." "Understood." "Let me know if you need anything," Caleb said. By the time the car pulled through the heavy iron gates of the castle, Hadassah had drifted into an exhausted sleep. Boaz looked down at her pale face. He felt a sharp pang of worry. He was the king, yet he couldn't protect her from the shadows in her own mind. He carried her inside, passing through the grand foyer. On the long velvet sofa, Asher and Ephron were distracted by a show on the television. Ephron was the first to notice them. He stood up quickly, his eyes wide. "Your Highness?" "What happened?" Ephron whispered, rushing over. "She's overwhelmed," Boaz said shortly. "She needs rest." Asher stood up behind Ephron, placing a steadying hand on his mate's shoulder. "She's safe here. The castle is quiet today." Boaz nodded and carried her up the wide stone staircase to their floor. He laid her gently on the bed and pulled a heavy silk blanket over her. He stayed for a moment, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest, before quietly closing the door. Downstairs, the kitchen was a blur of motion. Boaz walked in, intending to fix a light lunch for when Hadassah woke up, but the staff immediately swarmed him. "Please, sire, let us handle this," a maid named Zipporah said, gently taking a loaf of bread from his hands. Boaz stepped back with a small, tired laugh. He let them take over, heading to the window to stare out at the vast green borders of the Zion kingdom. He didn't see them. Beyond the magical veil, where the forest grew thick and the air felt heavy with ancient power, 4 figures stood in the shadows. Reuben stood at the front, his eyes fixed on the castle spires. Beside him stood Zipporah, Ada, and Keziah. They were invisible to the guards. Their magic masked their scent and their heartbeats. Reuben adjusted his gloves. He had spent years preparing for this moment. He knew the risks. He knew that once they stepped across that line, there was no going back. "Is everyone ready?" Reuben asked. The women nodded. There was no fear in their eyes, only a cold, hard determination. "The king thinks his walls are high enough," Reuben said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "He's about to find out how easily they crumble." He took a long, purposeful step forward. His boot crossed the invisible line of the kingdom's border. "Let's give them a reason to be afraid." "I'm not going in there," Hadassah wrote, her pen pressing so hard into the notebook the paper nearly tore. Boaz stared at the messy ink. He looked from the notebook up to his mate's pale face. They stood just outside the cafeteria doors, where the roar of hundreds of hungry teenagers sounded like a physical wave. He reached out, resting a steady hand on her shoulder. To him, the lunchroom was just a room full of subjects and peers. To her, it looked like a battlefield. "It's just lunch, Hadassah," Boaz said, keeping his voice a low, soothing hum. "Caleb already found us a table. Marissa is waiting. No one is going to touch you while I'm standing there." Hadassah didn't look up. She clutched the notebook to her chest like a shield. She remembered her old school too well. She remembered the way the social groups carved out the room like hungry wolves. The athletes took the center, the popular girls took the windows, and people like her were left to find a corner where they wouldn't be noticed. Or worse, where they would be targeted. "Come on," Boaz urged. He gently took her hand, pulling her toward the swinging double doors. "You need to eat. Your stomach has been growling since second period." The moment they stepped over the threshold, the world changed. The smell of greasy fries and floor cleaner hit them, but for Hadassah, it was the eyes. She felt every gaze in the room lock onto her. To her, the students didn't look like teenagers. They looked like predators. Her hand began to shake in Boaz's grip. "Hadassah? You're freezing," Boaz muttered. He stopped walking, sensing the sudden spike of adrenaline in her scent. It went from sweet to sharp and metallic. "Fear." She didn't answer. Her breathing turned into short, ragged gasps. The walls of the cafeteria seemed to lean inward. The ceiling felt like it was dropping. The colorful posters on the walls blurred into streaks of red and yellow, spinning like a dizzying ride. "Hey, look at me," Boaz commanded, his alpha tone slipping out. Hadassah couldn't. Her vision shifted, warping the room into a strange, distorted bubble. Her knees turned to water. Before Boaz could catch her weight, she collapsed onto the linoleum floor. "Hadassah. Speak to me." Boaz dropped to his knees, ignoring the hundreds of students who had gone silent to watch the scene. He pulled her into his lap, wrapping his large arms around her small frame. He didn't care about the whispers or the phones being pulled out to record. He tucked her head under his chin and began to whisper. "You're safe. I'm right here. Breathe with me. Just follow my chest." He took deep, exaggerated breaths. Slowly, the frantic pounding in Hadassah's chest began to sync with his. The fisheye blur in her eyes faded, replaced by the familiar dark fabric of Boaz's shirt. She gripped his sleeves, burying her face in his chest to hide from the staring crowd. "I want to go," she whispered, her voice barely a thread of sound. Boaz didn't hesitate. "We're going." He shifted his weight and lifted her in one smooth motion, carrying her bridal style. He walked through the cafeteria with his head held high, his eyes flashing a warning to anyone brave enough to comment. Outside, the cool air hit them, but Hadassah was still trembling. Boaz spotted his driver near the black SUV in the parking lot. The man saw them coming and scrambled to open the rear door. "Caleb?" Boaz projected his voice through the mind link. "Gray? What happened?" I felt a spike of panic, Caleb's voice echoed back instantly. "Hadassah had an attack. I'm taking her back to the castle. Tell the others we're done for the day." "Understood, Alpha. Let me know if you need the royal physician." Boaz climbed into the back seat, never letting go of Hadassah. As the car pulled away from the school, the exhaustion of the panic attack finally took its toll. Her eyes fluttered shut, and her head slumped against his shoulder. She was out cold before they cleared the school gates. 20 minutes later, the SUV rolled up the long, winding drive of the Zion Castle. The driver jumped out to open the door, but Boaz gave him a silent nod of thanks and handled his maid himself. He carried her through the massive stone entrance, his boots echoing on the marble floor. In the main lounge, Asher and Ephron were sprawled on the sofa, arguing over a TV show. Ephron was the first to bolt upright, his nose twitching. "Your Highness?" Ephron asked, rushing toward them. "Is she hurt? What happened at the school?" Asher was right behind him, his expression tight with worry. The air smells like a thunderstorm. Is she okay? She's fine, Boaz said, his voice tight. She just got overwhelmed. She needs sleep and quiet. Asher stepped back, pulling Ephron with him to clear the path. We'll keep the floor quiet, Alpha. Do you want us to bring up some tea? Later, Boaz said, already heading for the stairs. He reached their private suite and kicked the door shut behind him. The room was dim and smelled of cedar and lavender. He laid Hadassah on the bed, gently sliding her shoes off and pulling the heavy duvet over her. He stood there for a long moment, watching the way her eyelashes cast shadows on her cheeks. She looked so fragile in the middle of the massive king-sized bed. He headed downstairs to the kitchen, intent on making something light for her to eat when she woke up. But the moment he touched a skillet, 3 maids appeared as if from the shadows. King Boaz. Please, let us, a woman named Zipporah said, gently taking the pan from his hand. Go sit with the Luna. We will bring a tray up shortly. Boaz chuckled, looking at his empty hands. I suppose I'm dismissed, then. He turned to head back upstairs, but a sudden chill swept through the room. It wasn't the air conditioner. It was a shift in the very energy of the castle. Miles away, at the very edge of the Zion Kingdom's magical borders, 4 figures stood in the shadows of the ancient trees. Zipporah, Reuben, Ada, and Keziah. They stood perfectly still, their scents masked by deep, dark magic. They were invisible to the border patrols, ghosts in the woods. Reuben stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the distant spires of the castle. He had spent years preparing for this. He had memorized the maps, the guard rotations, and the weaknesses in the wards. Are we ready? Keziah whispered, her voice like cracking ice. Reuben didn't look at her. He took a single step across the invisible line that marked the kingdom's territory. He felt the tingle of the border magic trying to find him, but his cloak held firm. The time for talking is over, Reuben said, his voice cold and flat. Let's go find our queen. Stay exactly where you are if you value your lives. The shout from the border patrol echoed through the thick woods. Boaz felt the sudden spike of panic hit the pack's mind link like a physical blow. He dropped the knife he was using in the kitchen. It clattered against the stone floor. Intruders. Alpha, we have strangers on the soil. No scent. No warning. The mental voices of his warriors were frantic. Boaz didn't waste a second. He burst through the back door and sprinted toward the treeline. The father of the forest stood near the edge of the clearing, his hands pressed against the ancient bark of an oak tree. Stop them now, Boaz commanded. Do not let them take another step toward the village. The ancient spirit nodded. Deep groans vibrated through the earth as massive roots erupted from the dirt. They whipped through the air like wooden snakes. The roots coiled around the 4 figures standing in the brush. 2 women in the group raised their hands, glowing with a faint, magical hum. They tried to cast a counterspell, but the forest was too strong. The roots tightened around their waists and arms, pinning them to the spot. Boaz didn't wait to see if they would struggle. He shifted into his wolf form in one fluid motion, fur bursting from his skin as his bones rearranged. He grabbed a pair of shorts in his jaws and took off at a dead run. Behind him, a dozen warriors shifted and followed. Ephron blurred past them all, using his phase speed to reach the perimeter first. As Boaz reached the scene, he shifted back to human form and pulled on his shorts. He stepped into the light of the clearing. His chest heaved as he stared down the intruders. There were 4 of them. 2 women looked frustrated, their magic snuffed out by the forest's power. A younger girl stood to the side, looking more excited than scared. Tiny, white clouds actually hovered over her head, pulsing with a soft light. Then there was the man in the center. He looked calm. Too calm. You have a lot of nerve crossing into my kingdom uninvited, Boaz said. He narrowed his eyes and stepped closer. Give me one reason why I shouldn't let my men tear you apart right now. The man in the center didn't flinch. He actually smiled. It was a slow, mocking expression that made Boaz's blood boil. "I see you are getting along well with Hadassah, Boaz," the man said. Boaz froze. The mention of his mate's name coming from a stranger's lips felt like a slap. His eyes flashed a dangerous, glowing amber. His wolf, Asher, began to pace restlessly in the back of his mind. "Keep her name out of your mouth," Boaz growled. A pale woman next to the man stepped forward as much as the roots would allow. "Have you heard of Athaliah the witch?" Boaz stiffened. The name was a dark legend. The mother of wolves had warned him about that name in whispers. It was a name associated with shadows and the end of bloodlines. He looked at the intruders with fresh suspicion. "What does a dead witch have to do with you trespassing on my land?" Boaz asked. "She isn't as dead as you'd like to think," the man interrupted. He leaned forward against the wooden restraints. "She is coming back. And she is coming for what belongs to her." Boaz stepped into the man's personal space. "And why would I believe a word you say? I don't know you. I don't trust you." "Well, I am an overprotective brother," the man said. His voice was smooth and teasing. "I tend to go to extremes when it comes to my sister's safety." Boaz felt a headache forming behind his eyes. He scanned the man's face, looking for a family resemblance to anyone he knew. "Sister? Which sister? Who are you?" The man didn't answer immediately. He let the silence hang in the air, enjoying the tension. Finally, he straightened his shoulders. "My name is Reuben Collision, Your Majesty," the man said. His smirk widened. "Does that ring a bell?" The world seemed to tilt for a second. Boaz felt a cold chill run down his spine. The Collision name was one of the most powerful and dangerous lineages in the supernatural world. If this was really Reuben Collision, then the girl he was protecting, his sister, was Hadassah. Boaz let out a short, dry laugh. It wasn't a sound of humor. It was the sound of a man realizing he was in a very complicated situation. He clenched his fists so hard his knuckles turned white. He could feel Asher shivering with a mix of fear and aggression inside him. The wolf didn't like the energy coming off this Reuben character. "What exactly do you want?" Boaz asked. He kept his voice low and dangerous. "Speak quickly." "I am here for a very important reason," Reuben said. He looked around at the gathered warriors, then back at Boaz. "A reason that involves your kingdom falling to pieces if you don't listen to what I have to say." Boaz stared at him for a long beat. He hated the man's confidence. He hated that Reuben knew things he didn't. But if there was even a 1% chance that Hadassah was in danger from a resurrected witch, he couldn't ignore it. Boaz turned to Ephron and gave a sharp nod. "Tell the forest to let them go." Ephron whispered a command. The heavy roots uncoiled and retreated back into the earth. The four strangers stepped forward, shaking out their limbs. "Escort them to the castle," Boaz barked at his warriors. "Lock them in my office. If any of them tries to leave, end them." Boaz didn't wait for a reply. He shifted back into his wolf form and took off toward the heart of the village. He needed to get to Hadassah before these strangers did. Behind him, Reuben Collision just watched the dust settle. "Is that a yes to the meeting then?" The morning air in the castle felt like ice against Hadassah's skin. She pulled the heavy blankets tighter, but the space beside her was empty. The lingering warmth of her mate, Boaz, had already faded. A heavy weight settled in her chest as the memories of the previous day at school rushed back. Every whispered word and judgmental look from the other students played on a loop in her mind. No one could blame her for her reaction, yet the embarrassment burned through her like a fever. Hadassah swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her feet hit the stone floor, and she shivered. She sat there for a long moment, staring at her thighs, her breath coming in slow, ragged sighs. She needed to find Boaz. He was her anchor, the only thing that made this strange, cold world feel like home. She didn't know about the tension brewing outside the castle walls or the dangerous guests waiting in the wings. She only knew she needed to feel safe. Across the castle, Boaz marched toward his office. His jaw was set tight. He could sense the intruders before he even reached the door. They were uninvited and unwanted. He pushed the heavy oak doors open and walked straight to his desk. He didn't offer a greeting. He simply sat down and stared. Reuben sat on the leather couch with his mate tucked close to his side. Opposite them, Ada and Keziah sat like statues. Keziah looked particularly strange today, with literal clouds swirling through the strands of her hair. "Give me one good reason for this visit," Boaz said. His voice was a low rumble, the warning of an alpha who was running out of patience. He fixed a hard stare on Reuben. Reuben didn't flinch. His expression remained like cracked ice. "Athaliah is coming back. She isn't coming alone this time. She has an army, and she's building it as we speak." Ada let out a sharp scoff, her eyes darting between Reuben and the alpha. "And why should I believe a word of this?" Boaz asked. Keziah leaned forward. The clouds in her hair darkened. "We are her daughters, Boaz. We are the ones who sent her back to the world of witches. She made a vow. She promised she would return the moment the new rulers appeared. That time is now." Boaz opened his mouth to respond, but his heart skipped a beat. He felt a familiar pull in his chest. Hadassah. She was close. He could feel her nervousness radiating through the halls. "Please, Luna, keep her away from this room," he thought. He didn't want her anywhere near these people. The door handle rattled. Boaz watched in slow motion as the heavy latch turned. Hadassah stepped into the room, her eyes wide. She froze. The sight of the strangers and the heavy, thick tension in the air hit her like a physical blow. Her breath hitched. Memories of her past, of a life where interruptions meant pain, flooded back. She didn't say a word. She slammed the door shut and bolted. "They will hit me," Hadassah whispered to the empty hallway. She began to run, her heart hammering against her ribs. I interrupted. "I'm going to be punished." She remembered the man from her past. He used to strike her until she couldn't stand. He would lock her outside in the snow and the rain, laughing while she froze. Tears blurred her vision. She didn't see the small figure in the hallway until she slammed into him. Hadassah hit the ground hard. Asher, a young fae, tumbled down beside her. He looked at her in shock, his eyes wide as he watched his Luna gasp for air. She wasn't just crying, she was breaking. "I've got you," Asher whispered. He scrambled up and pulled her trembling body against his. "It's okay. You're okay now." Hadassah didn't hear him. She clung to his shirt, her fingers digging into the fabric. She mumbled words that didn't make sense, her mind lost in a dark place. Ephron, Asher's mate, came skidding around the corner. He had sensed the spike of terror. He stopped dead when he saw them. What happened? Why is she like this? Asher looked up, tears streaming down his own face. "I don't know. She's hurting, Ephron." Ephron knelt down, reaching out a hand to comfort them both. "Calm down, baby. Please." The sound of heavy boots echoed in the corridor. Boaz was coming, and his aura was a storm of fury and fear. Sensing the alpha's approach, Asher's instincts took over. He didn't see a friend, he saw a threat to the broken woman in his arms. He dragged Hadassah toward the corner of the hallway, shielding her with his body. Boaz rounded the corner, the guests following in his wake. He stopped short at the sight of his mate unconscious in the arms of the small fae. "Asher, move," Boaz commanded. He used his alpha voice, a sound of pure authority that vibrated in the bones of everyone present. Asher flinched. The power of the voice was too much. He shifted instantly into his tiny fae form, disappearing into Ephron's hair to hide. Boaz didn't hesitate. He scooped Hadassah up from the floor. "Watch the guests," Boaz barked at the guards. He didn't look back as he carried his mate toward their quarters. Ephron carried his trembling mate back to their own room. He shut the door and leaned against it, letting out a long breath. You can come out now, Asher. The tiny fae flew from Ephron's hair and shifted back into human form on the bed. He buried his face in the pillows and sobbed. The weight of the alpha's voice still felt like a heavy hand on his chest. Ephron sat on the edge of the bed and pulled Asher into his lap. He rubbed the boy's back until the loud sobs turned into quiet sniffles. Why didn't you listen to me? Ephron asked softly. He lifted Asher's chin. I wanted to help her. She was hurt, Asher mumbled, his lips trembling. I thought you were going to take her away. Ephron sighed, a small smile playing on his lips. I was trying to help, you silly fae. Why did you run to the corner like that? Asher's cheeks turned bright red. He looked down at his shirt. Instinct. And what did those instincts tell you? That I have to protect my friends, Asher whispered. Ephron felt his heart swell. You have a big heart, Asher. Come on, give me a smile. I miss it. Asher shook his head, though a tiny smirk tugged at his mouth. No. Smiles are contagious. Ephron chuckled. Don't worry. I'm vaccinated. Asher let out a genuine laugh and threw his arms around his mate. Back in the main wing, the tension hadn't faded. Boaz stood before Reuben and the sisters one last time. His face was a mask of cold stone. Go home, Boaz said. We have school in the morning. Come back tomorrow when I can think clearly. As you wish, Keziah said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes held a warning. We will return. Boaz watched them leave, then retreated to his private study. He wasn't alone for long. Caleb, Marissa, and Gideon walked in. Gideon didn't wait for an invitation. He leaned against the desk and lit a cigarette, blowing a cloud of foul smoke into the air. Explain, Gideon said. Boaz looked at the man's dirty boots on the furniture. Your daughters were just here. They say a war is coming. I know, Gideon said, his voice grating like sandpaper. Then what are we doing sitting here? Boaz snapped. Gideon took another long drag of his cigarette and swatted at the air. Waiting for the right time. When is the right time? Boaz asked. When the blood starts flowing, Gideon replied. Are you planning to stare at that ceiling until it talks back to you? The voice didn't actually come from the room. It was just a memory of a joke someone had told Hadassah once. She stayed flat on her back, the silk sheets of the massive bed feeling more like lead weights than luxury. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's face. She felt the sting of his betrayal like a fresh piece of glass grinding into her heart. The mental scars were deep, and today, they felt permanent. A sharp series of knocks rattled the heavy bedroom door. Hadassah didn't move at first. She felt hollow, as if her soul had been scooped out, leaving only a tired shell behind. The knocks came again, more insistent this time. Hadassah forced herself up. Her legs felt heavy as she dragged her feet across the floor. She didn't check the peephole. She didn't care who was on the other side. She just turned the handle and pulled. Asher stood there. He was radiant, looking like a literal ray of sunshine compared to the gloom of the room. He wore a soft, light pink hoodie that made his eyes pop. He flashed a bright smile, though it faltered when he saw the dark circles under Hadassah's eyes. Good morning, Hadassah, Asher said. He shifted his weight, his energy vibrating against the stagnant air of the hallway. It's getting a little awkward just standing here, isn't it? Hadassah stepped back and swung the door wide. She couldn't find her voice, so she just pointed toward the couch in the corner. Asher didn't need a second invitation. He rushed inside and made himself at home on the cushions. Hadassah grabbed her notebook from the nightstand. The pages were almost gone, filled with the silent conversations of a girl who had forgotten how to speak to the world. She sat down next to him, her fingers gripping the pen. The silence stretched between them. Asher started picking at a loose thread on his sleeve. He took a deep breath, his nose wrinkling. How are you? You really worried me yesterday. Hadassah's pen scratched against the paper. I am fine, she wrote. She turned the book toward him. Asher didn't even look at the page. He looked at her messy hair and the way her shoulders slumped. You don't look fine. You look like you're carrying the weight of the whole castle on your back. Hadassah shook her head and wrote again, pressing harder this time. Trust me. I am really fine. Asher reached out, but instead of taking the notebook, he gently pulled it from her hands and tossed it onto the bed. Nope. We are done with the moping. Today is a rescue mission. Before she could protest, he grabbed her hand and tugged her toward the walk-in closet. He started rifling through the racks of clothes with high-speed energy. Here is the plan, Asher announced. First, we are going to a diner. A cute one with greasy hash browns and way too much coffee. Then, we are going to watch a movie. Nothing sad. Only something that makes us laugh until our stomachs hurt. After that, the mall. Because your wardrobe is way too depressing for someone this pretty. He pulled a warm yellow hoodie from a hanger and pressed it into her chest. Change. I am waiting downstairs. Don't make me come back up here and pick out your shoes, too. He didn't wait for an answer. He marched out of the room, leaving the door clicking shut behind him. Hadassah looked down at the yellow fabric. It was bright. It was loud. It was the exact opposite of how she felt. But for the first time in days, a tiny, genuine smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. She started to get ready. Downstairs, Asher's voice echoed through the stone hallways. Baby! Get down here. The sound of heavy, rhythmic footsteps followed almost instantly. Ephraim appeared around the corner, his expression a mix of concern and exhaustion. He stopped in front of Asher, folding his arms over his broad chest. What is the emergency? Ephraim asked. He looked at Asher's wide, shimmering puppy dog eyes and sighed. Oh, no. I already don't like whatever you're about to ask. Ephraim walked into the living room and sat on the main sofa. Asher followed him like a shadow, bouncing onto the cushion right next to him. I am taking our Luna out, Asher said. He crossed his arms and lifted his chin. We are going to have a normal day. No crying, no heavy thoughts, just fun. Ephraim narrowed his eyes at his mate. And did she actually agree to this? Or did you just talk at her until she gave up? Asher didn't blink. Of course she agreed. I am very persuasive. Oh, really? Ephraim leaned forward, a teasing grin playing on his lips. Yes, Asher pouted. Ephraim's face went serious in an instant. The answer is no. You aren't going. Asher's jaw dropped. What? Why? It is dangerous out there, Asher. You know the threats we are dealing with right now. I can't have both of you out in the open where I can't protect you. Ephraim's tone was firm, the tone of a leader who had already made up his mind. Then send the warriors. Asher whined. He threw his hands up in the air. Send a whole squad. I don't care. She needs this, Ephraim. She's wilting in this room. Do you want her to just disappear into the shadows? Ephraim looked away. He knew Asher was right about Hadassah's mental state, but the thought of his mate and his Luna being targets made his blood run cold. Please, Asher whispered. His voice cracked, and a single tear tracked down his cheek. I just want her to be okay. Ephraim let out a long, defeated breath. He reached out and pulled Asher into his lap, wrapping his massive arms around him. He used his thumb to wipe the tear away. Fine, Ephraim muttered into Asher's hair. But there is a condition. A big one. Asher looked up, hope shining in his eyes. Anything. You take 4 warriors. They stay within 10 feet of you at all times, Ephraim warned. He poked Asher's nose gently. And if you try to sneak away from them like you did last time, you will never leave this castle again. Do you understand me? Asher pouted, though his eyes were dancing with victory. I wouldn't dream of it. Ephraim chuckled, pulling him closer. You're a little sneaky fae. I know exactly what you dream of. So, is that a yes? Don't worry, they are just here to make sure we don't get into any trouble, Asher said, his lip poking out in a playful pout. Hadassah looked at the massive, muscular warriors standing by the heavy castle gates. They looked like stone statues in tactical gear. Ephraim was clearly not taking any chances with their safety today. She quickly opened her notebook and scribbled a question before the ink could even dry. Won't they attract too much attention? Asher glanced at the page and sighed. Of course they will. Look at those muscles. They stand out like sore thumbs, but Ephraim won't let us leave without them. Hadassah gave him a small, encouraging smile. She didn't mind the guards. If the king felt they were necessary, she trusted his judgment. She tapped her pen against the paper again. Don't let it ruin the day. We are going to have fun. You're right, Asher said, his mood shifting instantly. Whatever. Let's just go. He grabbed her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers as he pulled her toward the waiting black car. A driver held the door open while the warriors piled into a second vehicle right behind them. As the car pulled away from the stone walls of the palace, Asher noticed Hadassah flipping through the back of her notebook. That thing is almost out of paper, Asher noted. I am buying you a new one today. Hadassah shook her head rapidly. She didn't want him spending money on her. It felt too much like charity. She wrote a quick response. You don't have to do that. It is very nice, but unnecessary. Asher's eyes narrowed slightly. He had a way of reading people that made Hadassah feel like a glass bottle. I want to do it. And stop thinking that I am doing this because I feel sorry for you. I am not. Hadassah blinked, surprised by his bluntness. He was bossy, but in a way that felt like a protective older brother. She tucked her hair behind her ear and watched him. We never really introduced ourselves properly, did we? Asher asked, moving on before she could argue. I'll go first. I am Asher Taran Rosalia. My parents are Zebulun and Eliezer, the kings of the Elinthai kingdom. And, obviously, I am mated to Ephraim. He beamed with pride at the mention of his family. Hadassah felt a pang of envy at how easily he spoke about his home. The car slowed to a crawl and finally stopped in front of a charming building with a sign that read Mad Eats. We are here. Asher cheered. The best food in the city. Let's finish introductions inside. He practically dragged her out of the car. Inside, the bistro smelled like toasted bread and fresh coffee. A hostess led them to a sun-drenched table by a large glass window. The warriors took up positions at a table nearby, their eyes scanning the room. Once they ordered eggs Benedict for Asher and a classic breakfast for Hadassah, Asher leaned forward. Now, your turn. Tell me everything. Hadassah took her time. She liked the weight of the pen in her hand. It gave her a voice when her throat wouldn't work. She pushed the notebook across the table. My name is Hadassah Collison. My mother was Jochebed Nixon. She was a normal human and the most important person in my life. I had a brother once, but he disappeared a long time ago. Now, I am the maid of the Alpha King. Asher read the words slowly. He noticed she didn't mention a father. He also knew things about her brother that he couldn't say, not yet. The risk was too high. Your mom sounds like she was an amazing woman, Asher said softly. Hadassah's face lit up with a genuine, bright smile. For a moment, the weight of the kingdom and the silent guards felt miles away. The rest of the morning was a blur of laughter and sugar. After breakfast, they went to a theater to watch a comedy. Asher laughed so hard he nearly fell out of his seat. Afterward, they hit the mall. Asher stayed true to his word, buying her a high-quality leather notebook and more clothes than she could fit in a single closet. By the time they pulled back into the castle driveway at 4 p.m, the light-hearted mood vanished. The air inside the stone walls felt heavy and thick with tension. Something is wrong, Asher whispered. They walked into the main living room. It was crowded. Ephraim was there, along with Gideon, Miriam, Boaz, and Caleb. But there were 4 strangers standing in the center of the room. They didn't look like wolves. "Baby?" Asher moved toward Ephron. Ephron turned, his face softening the moment he saw Asher. He pulled him into a brief, protective embrace. Hadassah walked toward Boaz. He reached out, pulling her into his side and kissing her temple. His body was stiff, like a coiled spring ready to snap. "Shall we continue?" Boaz asked, his voice low and dangerous. One of the women stepped forward. She had a sharp, confident smirk. "Let us introduce ourselves first, Alpha. My name is Zipporah. I am a fire witch." Hadassah offered a small, polite smile. The woman seemed intense, but not immediately hostile. "I'm Ada," the second woman said. "I control water." Keziah, the third one added. Her face was a mask of cold stone. Ice, wind, and land. Finally, the man standing in the back stepped forward. He was tall, with features that looked hauntingly familiar to Hadassah. His eyes were fixed on her, filled with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "Reuben," the man said. His voice cracked. He took a shaky breath, his eyes never leaving Hadassah's. "Reuben Collison." "The witch is coming back," Reuben said. His voice was thick with a heavy sadness. Hadassah froze on the couch. That name hit her like a physical blow. It brought back memories of crashing waves and a storm that never ended. She felt the pain explode in her chest. Her brother was back. Just looking at him felt like a fresh wound. The sadness did not just sit on her skin. It moved through every cell in her body. She stood up. Her legs shook as she faced the group. Without a word, she turned and ran toward the stairs. Tears tracked down her red cheeks. Reuben winced as if he had been slapped. He watched her go, but he did not follow. Miriam rushed after her instead. Asher, the small creature, sensed the dark mood and flew up the stairs right behind them. Boaz watched his mate leave. He felt her agony through their bond. It made his own heart ache, but he had a job to do. He turned his cold gaze back to the guests. He needed to finish this meeting before he went to her. "We want to help you," Reuben continued. He cleared his throat and tried to stand taller. "We have forces. We know she has hunters working with her. We want to get rid of her for good this time." Keziah stepped forward. Her voice was flat and cold. "You already know about the powers. They came to you the moment you and the soul connected." Boaz nodded slowly. "My sisters and I will help you," Keziah said. "You and your mate need to master these gifts before the war starts." Boaz did not smile. He sent a silent message to his guard, Jethro. He told him to keep a very close watch on these visitors. "Gideon will show you to the guest rooms," Boaz said. He stood up and adjusted his shirt. "He will take you to the training arena tomorrow morning. I will be there with Hadassah." He walked away before they could answer. He needed to be with her. When he reached the door of their suite, he heard a soft voice inside. "It will be okay, Hadassah," Asher said. "Please stop crying. It hurts me to see you like this." Boaz stepped into the room. Miriam saw him and immediately stood up. She grabbed Asher by the wing and pulled him toward the door. The little creature tried to stay, but Miriam gave him a look. They left the room and shut the door. Boaz sat on the edge of the bed. He reached out and rubbed Hadassah's back in slow circles. "He is going to be here every day," Boaz said softly. "Until the dust settles, he isn't going anywhere." Hadassah sobbed harder. She buried her face in her hands. "You have to face him," Boaz told her. "You have to tell him what is on your mind." Hadassah did not answer. The anger and the pain were growing inside her like a fire. Boaz pulled her into his arms. He held her tight. He hoped his calm energy would rub off on her. "It will be all right," he whispered. "You both just need time." While Boaz comforted his mate, Reuben was in another part of the house. He was breaking down. He sat on a chair with his head in his hands. He thought about all the years he had missed with his little sister. The guilt was eating him alive. Zipporah stood near him. She did not have the right words to fix his heart. Instead, she just stayed close. She offered her hand and listened to him breathe. Both pairs of mates spent the night with heavy hearts. Morning came far too quickly. Hadassah woke up with a dull ache in her chest. She told herself she had to be brave. She had to look at her brother every day until she was strong enough to speak. She walked to the large training arena with Boaz by her side. The arena was busy. Members of the pack were already training. She saw her brother standing with the witches in a far corner. Boaz led her toward them. They exchanged stiff greetings. "Zipporah and I will train Boaz," Keziah said. She pointed to the alpha. "Reuben and Ada will work with Hadassah." Ada stepped forward. She looked very serious. "First is gravity. You can control the pull of the earth around you. Focus on this bottle." She placed a plastic bottle on the dusty floor. Hadassah stared at it. She tried to imagine it rising. It took several tries. Finally, the bottle wobbled and floated into the air. "Good," Ada said. "Now try to lift yourself." That part was much harder. Hadassah felt heavy, like her boots were made of lead. "Next is telepathy," Keziah called out from across the yard. "You will be able to talk to people even if they aren't in your pack." "Third is metamorphosis," Reuben said. His voice was shaky. "You can change how you look. You can mimic anyone." The training continued for hours. "Fourth is invulnerability," Zipporah added. "You can become immune to physical hits and spiritual attacks." The sun grew hot. Hadassah was sweating. "Fifth," Ada shouted with a grin. "Force fields. You can build walls of energy." "Is there a sixth?" Boaz asked. He was breathing hard. "Intangibility," Keziah replied. "You can walk through solid walls." "And the last one," Reuben said. He tried to smile at Hadassah to lighten the mood. "Teleportation. You can move from one spot to another in a blink." By the time they finished, everyone was exhausted. Sweat rolled down Boaz's face. He draped his arm over Hadassah's shoulders and kissed her forehead. He was proud of her. They started to walk back toward the pack house. The sisters and Reuben followed a few paces behind. Reuben looked at the back of Hadassah's head. He couldn't hold it in anymore. He needed to hear her voice. He jogged forward until he was right behind her. "Dassa," Reuben called out. Hadassah stopped in her tracks. That old nickname felt like a needle in her heart. "Wait, did you just call me that?" Hadassah asked, her voice cracking as she froze in place. The nickname was a ghost from a past she had tried to bury. It brought back the smell of pine needles and the sound of childhood laughter. Now, those memories only felt like salt in an open wound. Reuben stood before her, his eyes red and pleading. He didn't seem to care that Boaz was burning a hole in his back with a deadly glare. To Reuben, the rest of the world had vanished. "Hadassah, please," Reuben said. His voice was thick with emotion. "Just let us talk." Hadassah shook her head. She took a step back, her hands trembling at her sides. The pain of his disappearance had been a heavy weight for years. Seeing him now was like seeing a dead man walk. "I went to seek help," Reuben blurted out. He took a shaky breath, desperate to get the words out before she turned away. "That day, I went to seek help for us. I thought it would be easy. I was such a fool to think it would be that simple." Hadassah stopped moving. She watched as his eyes began to gloss over with unshed tears. "He caught me," Reuben continued. "That man caught me before I could get far. I really thought we were going to make it back to you. But he dragged me into the deep woods. He sold me to Athaliah." Hadassah felt the air leave her lungs. The name of the dark witch made the forest feel colder. That is where I met the others, Reuben said, trying to steady his voice. I did not know they were witches at first. I only found out later. I tried to come back to you, Hadassah. I tried so many times, but she caught me every single time. A sob broke from Hadassah's throat. She couldn't catch her breath. The anger she had held on to for so long began to melt into a puddle of grief and relief. I missed you so much, Reuben whispered. Tears finally spilled down his cheeks. You have no idea how much it killed me. Not being able to talk to you. Not being able to hear your voice. It was a nightmare. He couldn't hold it together anymore. Reuben sank to his knees on the dirt path. His shoulders shook as he looked up at her through a blur of salt and pain. I am so sorry, he sobbed. I am so sorry I could not come back for you. Hadassah looked at her brother on the ground. The wall she had built around her heart simply crumbled. She didn't care about the past or the secrets anymore. She ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck and pulling him close. She buried her face in his chest, feeling the warmth she thought was gone forever. I missed you, she muttered over and over. I missed you so much. Nearby, the tension in the air snapped. The bond between siblings pulsed with a new light, sending a wave of relief through the entire pack. Adon, the mate standing guard, felt the shift. The heavy cloud of sorrow that had followed Hadassah for years finally began to lift. The next morning, the sun seemed to shine a little brighter over the royal pack. Inside the main house, Asher stretched his arms high above his head. He let out a long, satisfied groan as he woke up. The room smelled like home, and for the first time in a long time, he felt truly safe. Good morning, a deep voice rumbled beside him. Asher jumped slightly, startled by the sound. Ephron was watching him with a soft expression. Before Asher could speak, Ephron leaned over and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead. He pulled Asher closer, tucking him against his side. Morning, Asher mumbled. He felt a surge of playful energy. He reached out and gave Ephron's bare chest a quick, sharp pinch. Ouch! Ephron barked, though he was already grinning. What was that for, baby? Asher shrugged, a mischievous glint in his eyes. I just felt like doing it. Oh, really? Ephron raised an eyebrow. He looked amused and dangerous at the same time. Really, Asher challenged. Ephron didn't say another word. He moved his hands toward Asher's waist with lightning speed. Asher realized the danger too late. Ephron's fingers began to dance against his ribs, sparking a wild storm of tickles. Asher gasped and fell back against the pillows. He let out a loud, hysterical giggle, kicking his legs as he tried to escape. Stop. Please, stop, he pleaded between fits of laughter. He eventually rolled to the other side of the bed, completely out of breath. He glared at Ephron, who was looking very proud of himself, but Asher couldn't stay mad. These small moments of joy were more valuable than gold. Downstairs, the atmosphere was just as light. Hadassah and Reuben sat at the breakfast table together. They didn't need many words. They just enjoyed the quiet company and the smell of fresh coffee. The strong bond they once had was knitting itself back together. The entire pack could feel the happiness radiating from Hadassah. It was a welcome change from the high stakes and constant fear of the previous weeks. However, miles away, the air was not so sweet. In a dark, cramped hut, a woman ran a bone comb through her tangled, greasy hair. Her eyes were yellow and full of spite. She stared into a cracked mirror, humming a low, discordant tune. I heard the siblings have reunited, she said. Her voice sounded like dry leaves scraping against stone. A man sitting in the shadows leaned forward. He mimicked a crying face, rubbing his eyes in a mocking gesture. How emotional, he sneered. It almost makes me want to weep. The witch turned to him, flashing a row of stained, yellow teeth in a jagged smile. We should give them a little surprise to celebrate. Don't you think? The man rolled his eyes and slumped back into his chair. Ugh. I am way too sober for this nonsense. The witch's smile vanished instantly. She slammed her comb down on the table, her eyes flashing with a dangerous light. "Just shut up," she snapped. "We made a deal, and I intend to keep it." The man went silent, watching her with a look of pure boredom. "Get the supplies ready," the witch commanded, looking back at the mirror. "They think they are safe now, but the real nightmare is only just beginning." The peace of the royal pack lands shattered with a single, jagged sound. A mournful howl tore through the air, vibrating deep in Boaz's chest. He didn't wait to think. He bolted from the pack mansion, his boots hitting the gravel hard. His heart hammered against his ribs, not from fear, but from a rising, ugly tide of agitation. He skidded to a halt as Jethro emerged from the tree-line. The warrior carried a woman soaked in crimson. Behind them, a large gray wolf followed, its fur bristling and a low, guttural growl vibrating in its throat. The scent of grief and raw fury coming off the animal was thick enough to taste. "What happened?" Boaz demanded. He kept his voice steady, but his eyes locked on the blood-staining Jethro's arms. "We found her near the border," Jethro panted, his face pale. "The scent of rogues is all over her. They left a note pinned to her clothes. She's still breathing, Alpha. We're taking her to the hospital now." Jethro handed a crumpled piece of paper to Boaz. On it, a single word was written in jagged, dark ink, 1. Boaz stared at the paper, his mind racing to piece together the threat. Before he could even process the word, a second warning howl erupted from the northern perimeter. "Alpha, we have 2 rogues trespassing." Mason's voice exploded through the mind link, sharp with panic. "Catch them," Boaz snarled back. "Now." On it, Mason replied, cutting the link. The atmosphere changed in an instant. The morning sun felt cold. It was as if someone had reached down and drained the joy from the pack, replacing it with a heavy, suffocating gloom. Boaz stood frozen for a moment, his hands clenched into fists. Anger boiled in his gut like molten lava. It was a hungry, destructive thing that wanted to roar. They had dared to bring blood to his doorstep. They would regret the day they thought they could challenge him. A few minutes later, a large wolf sprinted toward the mansion. Mason shifted mid-stride, catching a pair of shorts tossed by a nearby warrior. He looked exhausted, his chest heaving as he approached the Alpha. "We got them," Mason said, wiping sweat from his forehead. He frowned, looking back toward the woods. "But it was weird, Boaz. They didn't even fight back. They just gave up." Boaz's eyes darkened. "Bring them to my office." He turned and walked toward the mansion, his aura so heavy and dark that the pups playing in the living room scrambled into the corners to hide. He sat behind his heavy oak desk and waited. Soon, Mason and 2 warriors shoved 2 boys into the room. One looked barely 12 years old. The other was older, perhaps in his late teens. Both had the same hazel eyes and messy brown hair. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't kill you right now," Boaz said. His voice was a low, dangerous rumble. "You have a lot of nerve stepping onto kingdom land." The older boy stepped forward, shielding his younger brother. "We came to join you. My name is Hanok, and this is Manasseh. Our pack kicked us out because they said we were useless." Boaz leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "And you expect me to believe that?" "They wanted us to help them," the younger boy, Manasseh, whispered. His voice shook, and he stared at the floor. "They wanted us to help destroy your pack. They've teamed up with witches and hunters," Hanok added, his voice regaining some strength. "We refused to be part of it, so they hunted us. We had nowhere else to go." Athaliah. The name burned in Boaz's mind. He wanted to break something. He wanted to find the person responsible and tear them apart. "Take them to the guest rooms," Boaz told Mason, waving a hand dismissively. "We'll deal with their request later. This isn't the time. Watch them," he added privately through the mind link as Mason led the boys out. The door clicked shut, and a moment later, the scent of wild lilies filled the room. Hadassah stepped inside, her presence immediately dulling the sharp edges of his rage. She wants to get under your skin, Hadassah said softly. Boaz reached out and pulled her onto his lap. He buried his face in her neck for a second before kissing her. The tension in his shoulders started to melt. It's working. She knows exactly what she's doing. Then we keep training, Hadassah said with a small, determined smile. We train until we can win. Boaz let out a short, dry chuckle. I need to go to the hospital to check on the woman. Do you want to come? Yes, she said, taking his hand. Let's go. The Pack Hospital was a sterile, somber place. The halls were painted a dull gray, and the air smelled of sharp disinfectant. They reached a private room at the end of the hall. Boaz knocked once and pushed the door open. The room was filled with the soft glow of golden lamps. On the bed, the woman, Naomi, lay propped up on pillows. A large wolf paced the small space next to her, his claws clicking rhythmically on the floor. I can't get him to calm down, Naomi whispered, her voice raspy. It's okay, Hadassah said, stepping forward. Boaz looked at his maid in surprise. She usually stayed quiet around others, but today, she stood tall. She looked like someone who had decided that fear was a choice she no longer wanted to make. Shift, Boaz commanded the wolf. The animal paused, then slowly shifted back into a man. He quickly pulled on a pair of pants while Hadassah looked at the wall. My name is Ira, the man said, bowing his head to Boaz. Tell me what happened, Boaz said, pulling a chair up to the bed. We had an argument, Naomi said, her eyes filling with tears. I shifted and went for a run to clear my head. I wasn't paying attention. I didn't smell them until they were right on top of me. It's my fault, Ira muttered, his head in his hands. It is not, Naomi snapped at her mate. She turned back to Boaz. They forced me back into human form. There were so many of them, rogues, witches, even hunters. They told me to give you a message. They said this was just the first warning. Boaz felt his jaw tighten so hard it ached. Beside him, Hadassah placed a hand on his arm, her fingers squeezing gently. There's something else, Naomi said, her voice dropping to a pained whisper. There was a she-wolf there. She was standing back, just watching it happen. Alpha, she smelled like us. She smelled like our pack. The air in the room turned ice-cold. Boaz felt the blood drain from his face, replaced by a heat so intense he felt like he might explode. He could handle enemies. He could handle witches and hunters. But betrayal from within was a poison he couldn't stomach. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the arms of his chair. He stood up, his face twisted with a rage so pure it made the lights in the room flicker. He didn't speak to the people in the room. Instead, he projected his voice into the mind of every single wolf in the territory. Pack meeting. The square. Right now. A traitor breathes our air, eating at our table while they sharpen a blade for our backs, Boaz roared. The royal hall fell into a suffocating silence. Usually, the room felt grand with its oak floors and streaks of gold paint against the blue walls. Today, it felt like a cage. The heavy chandeliers hanging above the crowd seemed to tremble from the sheer force of the king's voice. Boaz stood on the marble podium, his hands gripped into white-knuckled fists. Beside him, Hadassah watched the crowd with wide, concerned eyes. He scanned the faces of his pack. He saw fear. He saw confusion. But somewhere in that sea of people, he knew there was a lie. They dared to disrespect this kingdom, Boaz growled. His chest heaved as his inner wolf pushed against his ribs, demanding blood. They dare to betray my trust. I will hunt them down. I will find them, and I will end them on the spot. A wave of gasps and sharp shrieks rippled through the hall. No one dared to look him in the eye. They knew the stories. You didn't play games with an alpha king. You didn't bruise his ego or threaten his home unless you were tired of seeing the sunrise. Boaz turned his head slightly toward his inner circle. Jethro, Mason, and Gideon stood like stone statues behind him. Their presence offered a small bit of comfort, but the weight of the crown felt heavier than ever. High-ranking members will meet in my office right now, Boaz commanded. He didn't wait for a response. The rest of you are dismissed. Warn the others. Tell them the storm is here. He walked off the podium with heavy, confident strides. Hadassah followed close behind him, her presence a soft shadow against his harsh light. They reached the office, and soon the room was packed with his strongest warriors and advisors. Some of the men were sweating through their shirts. Others stood perfectly straight, trying to hide their nerves. Boaz slammed his hands onto his desk. Jethro. Jethro stepped forward and bowed low. Your Highness. Lock down the borders, Boaz ordered. His voice was low and dangerous. No one leaves. No one enters. If a bird flies over that line, I want to know about it. Understood? As you wish, Your Highness, Jethro said with a firm nod. Boaz turned his gaze to the others. Keep your eyes open. Watch how people move. Watch who is talking to who. Gideon, get back to your mate on the other side of the kingdom. Spread the new rules. Mason, take the warriors. Search every house. I want every questionable item brought to me. If anyone complains, send them to me directly. He took a deep breath, trying to vent the heat rising in his blood. He had ruled as an alpha for a long time, but the stakes had never been this high. This wasn't just a border skirmish. This was a rot from within. You're all dismissed, he said, waving a hand toward the door. The members scrambled out of the office, leaving the king and queen in silence. Boaz slumped into his black fur-lined chair. He rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache pulsing behind his eyes. He felt drained, and the real fight hadn't even started yet. A pair of soft hands settled on his shoulders. Hadassah began to knead the tension out of his muscles. Boaz leaned back into her touch, finally letting out a long sigh. We are going to win, Boaz, Hadassah whispered. She leaned down so he could see her small, confident smile. I know their plans are disgusting, but they aren't stronger than you. I trust you. Boaz reached up and squeezed her hand. Before he could speak, a frantic series of knocks echoed through the door. Come in. Boaz shouted, straightening his back instantly. Ephron and Asher entered. Asher was panting for breath as if he had been running to keep up with Ephron's long strides. Ephron didn't wait for an invitation. He walked over to the couch and sat down with a frown. Alpha Boaz, Ephron said, his voice tight. Hadassah. Asher chirped. He rushed over to hug the queen, his youthful energy cutting through the dark mood of the room. What is it, Ephron? Boaz asked. The trees are frantic, Ephron said, looking out the window toward the forest. The plants have been shivering for 2 days. They are scared, Boaz. My babies don't act like this for no reason. Ephron's brow furrowed. He let out a low growl of his own, a sound so deep it made Asher jump. The smaller boy scrambled back, accidentally shifting into his smaller form in his surprise. His clothes fell in a heap on the floor as he ducked behind Hadassah's long hair for cover. My trees know about the traitor, Ephron continued, ignoring the distraction. But they can't find them. It's like the person isn't actually on our land, even though their influence is here. Boaz stood up, his heart sinking. That isn't good. If we can't track them, we can't stop them. Asher shifted back into his human form behind the sofa. Done, he announced, popping his head up after pulling his clothes back on. He was blushing a bright red. I actually have something to tell you too. Ephron looked at his mate. What did you do, Asher? Well, news travels fast, Asher said, fidgeting with his fingers. My parents heard about the trouble. They heard their little angel might be in danger. Ephron let out a long, dramatic groan. Please tell me they aren't coming here. They always make such a scene. Asher bit his lip and held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes. Max. Ephron looked at Boaz and Hadassah with a look of pure defeat. Just go with the flow, okay? Trust me. Before Boaz could ask what that meant, Jethro burst back into the office. He was out of breath and pointing toward the front gates. "Your Highness! A gate is opening!" Jethro yelled. "A magical gate.